On the last video we did this simple shape with the rows all starting on the same column. Now we're gonna try to start the rows in different columns. Each row is gonna have 4 stitches. We start the same way we started before, choosing a square to start, needle from top to bottom, and trapping that piece of thread as we do our diagonal stitches, the first side of the X. And as I said, we're gonna go along for 4 stitches. When we finish, it's time now to go back towards the left. And here, if we finish the stitch, what's going to happen is we cannot come out on the bottom of this square because the other row starts on the top and we want to move the needle there, but the other row only starts 1 square to the left, to the right. So if we move that way, we'll have this piece of thread on the back that is not going vertically like the other stitch. It doesn't look so bad and it doesn't really ruin the stitch, but if we had bigger distance to go, if for instance the next row only started 2 stitches to the right, we would get a piece of thread that is longer and it really looks bad on our finishing. So instead of doing that, I will restart here again, just so we get to that same point again. And if you have trouble trapping the thread, just untangle it and make sure to trap it. So I just did the same steps I did to start the row, but when I got to the end, instead of coming back, I already jumped to the next row. And here on my scheme you can see where I am. So I have 1 stitch more to go to the right and 3 to the left when I came out with my needle on the top row. So I'm going to do that stitch to the right and finish it, go and come back. And now I'm going to work my way to the left to do those stitches to the left. So I'm actually doing the second row while leaving the first row unfinished, but that's okay because we always finished a row on the same place we started. So now here's where I am, and it has no contact, what I call point of contact, with the third row above it. I have to come back 1 stitch to have a point of contact to go to the third row. If I come back 1 stitch, now I am at the point where the third row starts. And again, I am going to go ahead and do that row without finishing the second row. And what happens is, when I go to the right and then move back to the left to finish that third row, I always end up on the exact point I started the row. So I'll come back to that exact point and then I can finish the second row. And that is the biggest trick of the perfect finishing, is that instead of moving your thread through the back row after row, you always start the next row when you reach a point of contact with it. And then you see I ended on the exact spot where I started it. So now I can just continue with the second row as if I had never left it. And then when I'm done with the second row, my needle comes back to the exact point where I finished the first row, and I can just come back and finish it. That's what guarantees the perfect finishing on the back, is that I always do the rows without moving threads on the back. The problem I run into now is that exactly because I always finish where I started, to now hide the thread, I would have to hide it on the same spot I hid the starting one. I don't want that to happen, so I just redid half of the stitch where I started the first row, just so I reach the second row and I can hide the thread. Ideally, I would not have done that. Ideally, I would have planned ahead and started the first row on a point of contact with the second row. For instance, if I started the first row far to the right end instead of the left end. But we'll see more of that later. For now, what we did is just really good. We'll try another shape now, and now I decided to always have it already done on the left ahead, so you can keep comparing what we're trying to do as I do. So I'm trying to do it to the right, and you can see on the left one already done. I start just like I start everything, with one stitch trapping the thread, and doing half of that row. Thanks, Capito.
Can I put them again?
No. So I'm actually doing the whole row, going and coming back, because the next row starts exactly on the same column, so I can do that. I don't need to search for points of contact with the next row yet. When I'm done with this row, though, I'm gonna finish the half of the row exact on the point of contact to the next square. So I'm gonna take advantage of that, do the first row of the square, and then when I jump to what would be the start of the second row, I am exactly at the point of contact with the third square. So I have to go ahead and do the third square, otherwise I lose that point of contact. So I jumped ahead to the third square, and I'm gonna do that whole square before I come back to that exact same point and do the row that was missing. It may seem like a lot to keep track of and a lot of chances to get lost, but in time it's just natural that you just keep going with half rows and then keep coming back, finishing those rows. It's almost easier because then you only look at your pattern once, and then you can just spend a lot of time coming back and finishing those unfinished rows. The important thing is not to lose track of those rows that were not done even half. If this was too fast, don't worry, we're just about to repeat that shape again. And now I'm just done here. This next shape we do looks a lot like the first one, but now we have a lot more points of contact to keep track of, because there is a lot more squares that only contact the original squares in one point. So it looks more complicated, but it's just a matter of keeping track of these little points of contact and really going to the next square when we reach them. So we start like the other ones. And again, because the second row starts on the same column as the first row, we can just do the first row entirely. If the thread is a little bit too long, you can just cut the excess. This is still trapped in 2 stitches, so it's secure enough. The beginning is very similar to the shape we just did before. We're just going to do the first 2 squares, and then instead of coming down and finishing this row, we are just going to go ahead as if we're going to do the second row of this square, and it just so happens that we reach the point of contact with that third square. So just be careful that you realize you have to leave one empty row to finish when you come back. When you work our way up, you know, there's always the risk that you forget that this is an empty row that you didn't do yet, and then you start going to the right without leaving it. And here I still have one row to do on the top of the third square. And I can do that before I reach that point of contact that goes down to that square on the right. I actually didn't reach that point of square because I chose to go with my needle to the top and do the second row of this topmost square. So when I come back is when my needle actually goes through that one hole that is my point of contact. So now I can't miss the opportunity to do this square that I just started. And you see that here I got distracted and I worked as if I was going to come back the row, but actually I have to go down now and do the second row of this square. And again, when I do that, instead of starting the second row, I have to work my way to that rightmost square because I reached the point of contact and I can't lose the opportunity to go there. But then, when I finish this square, I'm always at the exact point where I started. So now I can continue to do that square as if I had never left. I just do the second row, and then before I start coming back, I am now in position to do this middle bottom square. So I'll do the first row. Just correcting here the position of the needle, and round needles do this a lot less often of getting extra threads of the fabric. So it's just a matter of keeping track of your steps, because now here, for instance, I could go to the left, but I have to remember I actually came from the right. So I came from this square and I'll finish it, and I'll just work my way back. Now I could even not look at the pattern. I just have to finish those half rows that I left undone. And I'll say this again, it may look overwhelming, but in time it's almost visceral that you just keep doing half rows all along your pattern, and then you just have the work of coming back and filling each of those half rows, and that gives you the perfect finishing, because you never go from row to row from the back of this stitching. You just work along the whole pattern all at once. I find it easier, and I created the habit of doing it like this, even if it's a final product that I frame and I don't have to worry about the back. The perfect back is almost just a plus. On the next video, we'll add some color. Keep practicing. I think I gave you enough to practice for a while, and I'll see you on the next video.